like the flowering parts, the xylem, the phloem, you know, transpiration, photosynthesis, whatever, right? So today we're looking at how all those things kind of fit together because we're getting ready for our test, right? Our test is going to be on Friday. The essay will be on Thursday. So Thursday we'll have our essay, and then Friday we'll have our multiple choice. Remember that your plant project is due on Friday, which means that you'll have time to work on it today, tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday. So on Thursday, for example, after you finish your essay test, the rest of the time can be devoted to your project. Same thing on Friday. If you have not finished your plant project by then, after you've completed your exam, if you have any extra time, you can work on the plant project. The plant project will be due that evening, so after school. So you still have 4 days to get it done. At this point, you should be pretty close to getting finished, but I did leave some extra room there in the event that you were being extra creative. But okay, our objective for today, as you can see, students will be able to explain the relationship between the vascular system and photosynthesis. All right, so if you got a second, you can jot that down into your agenda or your planner. It's also going to be in the class cake, so if you don't have time to look at it, it's also going to be there for you. Okay? Okay, let's go ahead and jump into our do now. I guess I should show you this one more time, even though it's the end of the day. Why not? Right, you guys are in Group E. This is what your schedule is if you're here. If you're here and you've been to your other classes today, this is your schedule. Bio is going to be your last class. Oh, okay. I guess I was done with that anyway. Okay, so I'm going to give you a few minutes. Let's call it 4 minutes to get to your class kick and go ahead and start working on your do now. Oh, too loud. Oh no, I'm yawning. Oh, excuse me. It's too early for yawning. I am very tired, Casey. But I'm okay. Thank you for asking. Oh no, yawning. Okay, at this point, pretty much everybody should be at class kick. You should have answered your do now. I'm coming very close to letting you know that you are finished with it by giving me a thumbs up in the chat box. Again, once you're finished, make sure you give me that thumbs up in the chat box. About 30 more seconds. Oh, no. Excuse me. Oh, sorry. Okay. And that about just ends our time. So let's talk about the warm-up. Spoilers. Okay, so plants and animals. What are two systems that are vital for plants and animals? I'll give you a hint. It's in the chart right next to the question. That's true. I guess I should have specified between body systems and just regular systems. But you're not wrong. Respiration and photosynthesis. Right? These are, remember, these are the connected systems that are helping plants and animals stay alive and function. This little chihuahua cute? I thought it was cute chihuahua. Okay, so the formula for photosynthesis. We talked about it yesterday, but like I said, we're trying to connect what we've learned to what we know. So photosynthesis, remember that plants drink water, they breathe in carbon dioxide, and in the presence of sunlight, they will create the sugar that we eat in the form of glucose and the oxygen that we breathe. And just like I mentioned yesterday, it's important to remember the molecular part of this formula. So water is going to be H2O. Carbon dioxide is going to be CO2. Sugar is C6, oops, H12O6. And of course, oxygen, O2. Now, it's possible that the star is going to ask you to identify parts of this equation based on words or based on the molecular formula, so it's important that you're familiar with both of them. But I think at this point, you guys are pretty good with that. The only hard one that I anticipate is sugar, right? C6H12O6. That's the chemical formula for sugar, specifically glucose. Okay, so that is our equation for photosynthesis. Can someone tell me what is the equation for respiration? For those of you math heads, remember that respiration is the inverse of photosynthesis.
So.
Okay, you could go.
No, you can go.
Okay. Is it sugar
It is.
plus oxygen,
Uh-huh.
and then it would equal water plus carbon dioxide, and then ATP?
You got it. Thank you so much, Hamza. So remember that in photosynthesis, plants are literally taking sunlight and they're creating food from the sun, right? So the energy in this equation is going to be in the sunlight. So water and carbon dioxide in the presence of sunlight, plants will make sugar and oxygen. So they're making food from energy. Respiration then, inverse, right? Instead of making food from energy, we are making energy from food. So we've taken the sugar, we're eating it, we're breaking it down, and we're creating that energy, right? So they're inverses. Remember that the products of one, so these things are the reactants of the other, and vice versa, right? So products of this one, the reactants, reactants of this one, the products, so on and so forth. That was messy. I can do that better. How about like this? And like this. No, you know what I'm saying. It's easier with the whiteboard. Oh, welcome Dina. Welcome Gabriel. Okay, so Pretty simple stuff, right? Any questions about these equations? We're going to go into more depth on how this relates to what we're talking about today, but I wanted to go ahead and establish this as a baseline before we move forward. Sharaven asked if I can invite her in, so I will do that now. Okay, then let's move on. So what's the difference then? Or before we get there, what's the goal of respiration? I mentioned it a second ago. What is the goal of respiration? This is the simplest way to put it, and is also the easiest way to make an inverse. So the goal of respiration is to make energy from food. So remember to work smarter, not harder, right? If you had looked ahead, you could have seen that here was the equation for respiration if you didn't remember it. So remember, this process is taking place inside the mitochondria. We're taking the oxygen that we're breathing and converting it into a waste product, which is carbon dioxide. The glucose is converted into energy. So remember, the glucose is going to be what the plant generated from the sun. The plant literally absorbed the sun's energy, made food, then we take the food and we get that energy from the sun. It's kind of like when we talked about that ecology stuff, the food pyramid, right? The amount of energy that we're getting is a fraction of what the energy was from the sun, but it is still solar powered. Welcome, Shraven. Okay. Simple stuff, right? Not too complicated. Alrighty, let's move on. So we talked about respiration then. Respiration is making energy from food. Can someone tell me what is the goal of photosynthesis? If the goal of respiration is to make energy from food, what is the goal of photosynthesis?
To use food as energy?
Close, but not quite there. Casey, you're halfway there. Casey says to make food from energy. Right? So, look back here, right? Respiration, make energy from food. Photosynthesis, make food from energy. Right? So again, the plant is taking sunlight and turning it into sugar. This sugar will then power cell respiration. That's why I wanted you to have those equations written out so that you can go back and reference them. So if that doesn't make any sense, go back, look at your equations. Don't worry, I'll come back. So again, photosynthesis, making that sugar, right? These products then become the reactants of respiration. So photosynthesis creates the sugar, which then powers the mitochondria to break it down and have energy in a usable form, right? We can't eat sunlight. We're not like plants. Plants can eat it fine, and then they can make food from it, and then they can store that food for later. So when we talked about tubers a while back, tubers are storing all that sugar in their roots. Let's go ahead and write that down. That might be important. Tubers, actually, let's try for example. For example, tubers store glucose in roots. If you had to think of a human analogy for that, what would you say is the human analogy for storing glucose in roots? How do we store glucose? If you're anything like me, you notice it every time you look in the mirror in the morning, and all you see is the weight, the fat, all that stuff that makes you feel bad, right? I promise I'm okay. It's just been a long day. So for us, it's stored as fat, right? The plants are doing it in the same way. They're just storing it in their roots. So whenever we're eating stuff like potatoes or French fries, we're essentially eating all that stored energy. So the plant is taking the sunlight, turned it into food, and then stored it away for use later. Because just like us, plants don't know when they're going to get their next meal all the time. So sometimes they have to have a resource to, to go back to. That's how we have fat. The fat is there so that if we miss a meal, our body can break down some of that fat, turn it into energy, and then we can keep on living. So the plants are doing the exact same thing. They're taking the sugar that they made from the sun, storing it, and then they can get it later if they need it. Okay? Now, where does photosynthesis take place? Can someone tell me, where does photosynthesis take place?
Am I gonna get? Okay, can I try?
Go for it.
In the mitochondria?
So that's where respiration takes place. Where does photosynthesis take place?
Is it in the chloroplast?
It
Because that's where the
is.
chlorophyll is.
Yeah. The chloroplast is the organelle that performs photosynthesis. Now, where do you think you're going to find the most chloroplasts? Do you think you're going to find a bunch of chloroplasts in the roots? Probably not, right? Oh, thank you, Miguel. Perfect. The leaves, right? The leaves have the most chloroplasts. Ooh, man, I'm bad at spelling, you guys. Chloroplast. It makes sense, right? The leaves are the things that are going to be pointing towards the sun. The roots are underground, right? They're not going to be getting a whole bunch of sun. So they need the leaves that are facing the sun to create the sugar that the plant will need to grow. So the chloroplast is the organelle. The leaves are going to be the structure. So think of the leaves. Actually, you know what? I'm going to ahead of myself. We're going to come back to that in a second. Okay, let's keep it simple. Let's keep it there. Right? So photosynthesis is taking place inside the leaves because that's where the chloroplasts are. The chloroplasts are going to be generating sugar from the sunlight, which will then go into the mitochondria and create energy. Okay? Any questions? Can I move on? Alrighty. So, the leaf. I don't expect the star to ask you this, but just in case they do, I want to make sure that you see it. The specific cells that carry this out are called the palisade mesophyll. It's the certain layer of the leaf that has those super photosynthetic cells. Now, like I said, I haven't seen it in a long time. The last time I saw it was like, I don't know, 5 years ago. And it wasn't really even asking about the palisade mesophyll. It was, a photosynthesis chloroplast question. But they threw that word at you trying to scare you. So I put it here so that you can see it, so that hopefully it won't scare you too much. The palisade mesophyll are just the cells that are directly underneath the cuticle. Like they're just underneath that tip of skin on the leaf. So it makes sense they're going to be the most photosynthetic, right? Because they're the ones that are closest to the light. So that's where most of the photosynthesis takes place, on a leaf. Okay. Can I get someone to read this text for me underneath what's in a leaf?
Okay, I can read it.
Thank you, Mizari.
Instead of a mouth for breathing, leaves have a stomata, pores in the underside of the leaf for gas to flow in and out, also for water to leave.
Very good. Thank you, Mizari. So remember that we have a mouth, right? What human organ is most comparable to a leaf? Let's start off with a mouth, right? A human mouth is designed to open and close. In the same way, stomata open and close to regulate gas exchange. So what that means is plants don't have a mouth, right? But they do have these little holes, these pores that are called stomata or stoma. I think stomata is singular and stoma is plural. These regulate gas exchange. You'll notice here that carbon dioxide is being let in once that pore opens. So when it opens, carbon dioxide is coming in. Does anybody know why carbon dioxide is going into the plant? Why does the plant need carbon dioxide? I'll give you a hint. Whoop. Why does a plant need carbon dioxide? That's true to live, but specifically, plants need carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. Remember the two reactants, water, carbon dioxide. So water is going to get from the soil, right, from the roots. Carbon dioxide is going to be getting from the leaves. So, boop, boop, boop. Plants need carbon dioxide to perform photosynthesis. Now you notice that not only is carbon dioxide going in, water and oxygen are actually leaving. Can anybody explain why oxygen and water might be leaving from the leaf? Way to go, Mazari, good job. If carbon dioxide is going in, why is water and oxygen going out? Casey says to be used in the atmosphere. That's true, but more locally. If you're opening the stomata, why do you think those things go out? Very good, gas exchange. But think of it this way. Think of it as like a pot of boiling water. Whenever you see a pot of boiling water and you take, oh, that's not what I want. How about this? Ooh, that's black and white, gross. Yeah, that's better. Whenever you have a pot of boiling water, what do you notice coming out of the top of that pot of boiling water?
Water vapor?
Water vapor, very good, Hamza. Right, that water has kind of been put under a lot of pressure, it's been put under a lot of heat, and so what's going to happen is it's going to start to form water vapor. Same thing with these plants. The plant is outside all day long, right? So there's probably a lot of water inside that plant, but there's probably a good amount of it that's going to be turning into water vapor. So whenever that pore opens up to get carbon dioxide in order to power photosynthesis, it's also going to be losing water. And remember that oxygen was a byproduct of the reaction. So oxygen is going to be a waste product. The same way that we breathe out carbon dioxide, plants are breathing out oxygen. Like Casey said, it's going to go into the atmosphere and help us live. But as far as the plant's concerned, majority of that oxygen is going to be a waste product. So whenever it opens up the stomata, when plants open the stomata, carbon, actually I'll just write CO2, it's much faster. CO2 enters while oxygen and water vapor exit. Makes sense, right? Think of it as like we talk about that pot of boiling water. It's kind of like, imagine that there's like a lid on the pot. As soon as you take the lid off, all the steam goes out, right? The lid was holding all of that water in, but as soon as the lid comes off, the water is just going to go. So when the stomata opens, think of it like a mouth, right? When that mouth opens, suddenly it just goes out into the air. Vapor, very good, Gigi, thank you. So all this gas exchange talk, gas exchange wrong. Gas exchange in humans takes place inside the lungs. So see the connection we're making here? We're talking about the respiratory system. So the plant, even though it doesn't have lungs, it doesn't have the alveoli, like the air sacs that we have, is still performing a very similar function. The stomata is opening and closing to let stuff in and out, just like our mouth opens to let stuff in and out. And the gas exchange itself is happening inside, very similar to our lungs. Okay? That's okay, Miguel, I understand. Any questions before I move on? No questions, no questions. Okay, thank you. All right, so let's focus in a little bit more on the stomata. Would someone mind reading the blue text here underneath stomata?
Do you want me to read again, sir?
Go for it, Mazari, thank you.
Also called stomata, holes in the leaf guarded by cells that control how wide the pore is guard. Right, the pore
Mm-hmm.
is guard cells important for gas movement and water loss.
Very good, thank you, Mazari. So the guard cells are kind of what regulate how open or closed it is, kind of like a gate, right? Like a guard at a gate. The guard either lets you in or doesn't let you in, right? So it's the same kind of thing. The guard cells are the physical cells that you see here. So the pore is the stomata. Well, I guess the stomata is everything together, but the pore is the hole, and the guard cells kind of open and close that hole depending on what needs to happen. 1 second. Okay. And actually, I meant for someone else to read this. Well, will someone else read this text underneath transpiration for me?
I can read it.
Thank you.
Okay, plant sweating. On wet days, the cells are swollen with water and they bend, opening the stomatopore. And on dry days, they are thin and straight, closing off the stomatopore.
Very good. Thank you so much, Casey. So that goes into how do plants regulate gas exchange? What are the plants doing in order to regulate the gases that go in and out? The simple answer is the stomata, right? Like we've been talking about. The stomata opens and closes to let air inside or to release air outside. Water vapor will also exit through the stomata. So it becomes very important to regulate how it opens and how it closes, right? So as Casey said here a second ago, we have wet days and dry days, right? So on wet days, the cells are swollen with water and they bend, opening the pore, which means that carbon dioxide can go in. On dry days, they are thin and straight, closing off the stomata pore. And actually, we'll talk about that in a second. So the gases that are being exchanged are going to be plants inhale carbon dioxide, plants exhale oxygen. So that means that carbon dioxide's coming in, oxygen's going out. And water vapor. So it's important that they regulate how open or closed they are, because if it's open for too long, it's going to lose a bunch of water. And as we've seen with plants, going back to our photosynthesis equation, water was a reactant. Plants need water to live. Okay. Now, this one I'm going to go ahead and leave because I like the way that I worded it. But what I would like someone to do, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Does someone think that they can explain what's going on in this image? Especially how it relates to the stomata opening and closing. Ooh, no brave souls. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and read what I wrote down. So, the xylem transports water, right? We're talking about our vascular tissue in plants. The vascular tissue is going to specifically be the xylem and the phloem. So right now we're looking at the xylem. The xylem transports water. Water is absorbed. Let me get a nice blue color. Is that going to interfere with everything? No, perfect. Okay, water is absorbed from the roots up through the flower and goes to the leaf. So remember, this is transpiration, right? Let's say that the guard cells are open. So if the guard cells are open, what that means is carbon dioxide is going to go in, oxygen and water are going to go out. So as water is coming up from the roots, it's leaving through this open stomata, right? I want to put a little water here. Boop. H2O. It's a little tinier. Yeah, there we go. Right? So actually I'll put that and oxygen. This is much easier whenever I'm doing it on a board. So the stomata is open. If the stomata is open, water vapor is leaving out, and so is oxygen. But this is the principle of transpiration, right? All the water from the roots coming up through the stem, out through the leaves. Think of it kind of like, like one of those water parks, like when you're going down one of those really big slides. As soon as the guy sends one kid down, there's 50 million kids in line ready to go after him, right? That's transpiration. It's literally pulling up the water from the roots out through the leaves so that whenever there's some water vapor that leaves, there's still some water there left over when the stomata closes. But that does mean that if the stomata does not close and it stays open, it's going to continue to lose water. Okay? So water comes up through the roots, through the stem, into the leaves, and then out through the stomata. That's the xylem, transporting the water. Water is absorbed by the roots and transported to the shoot. The stomata regulates gas exchange and water loss. So when the stomata is open, water is going to come up. When the stomata is closed, water is going to stay where it is. The water is used by the leaf to start the process of photosynthesis. Remember that we're talking about our photosynthesis formula, right? In order for photosynthesis to occur, plant needs both carbon dioxide and water to create the sugar and oxygen in the presence of sunlight. So, water is used by the leaf to start the process of photosynthesis. The open stomata bring in carbon dioxide. So let me go ahead and add that over here. CO2. Make it a little bit tinier. Yeah. Right, so the carbon dioxide is going in, water and oxygen going out. So the carbon dioxide is going in, the water is being brought up through the xylem, and these two things combined in the plant cell will trigger the process of photosynthesis and light. Photosynthesis makes sugar and oxygen. Okay, but that's only half of the story. What's the other half of the story? What's going on with the phloem? Does somebody think they can explain what's going on with the phloem?
Like in our own words, or can we read what you wrote?
Either one.
The bottom says the phloem takes the sugar from the leaf to the rest of the plant.
Very true, right? So Casey, where is the sugar in the plant?
In the leaf?
Yeah, very good, right? The sugar is being generated as a result of photosynthesis. So the leaves, remember, the leaves are carrying out photosynthesis, which means the sugar is going to be in the leaves. Now, the plant is a growing organism, right? If the roots sense water, it needs to grow towards water. If the plant needs to grow more leaves, it's going to require the energy, right? So the plant needs things to grow. Very similar to us that we have to eat in order to grow, right? Plant is the very same way. So you'll notice the phloem is flowing in two different directions. It's going to be taking the sugar from the leaves and it's going to go down to the roots, right? Because it needs to be able to get energy down to the roots because the roots need to grow, right? The roots are not just going to stay still. The roots are going to continue to grow and burrow deeper so they can get to better water. They can anchor the plant better. So it's got to grow down. But then you also notice that it's going to go up because it has to give sugar to the rest of the plant. We talked about meristems the other day, if you remember, right? So we have meristems here where there's new plant growth. Notice how these leaves are a bit smaller than these because they're growing. So the cells that are there need the sugar in order to grow. So the sugar is being transported from the leaves to the whole plant. This is what we mean by the vascular system, right? The vascular system means that things are being transported all over. The xylem is transporting water. The phloem is transporting sugar. Simples, right? Okay, so what happens to the sugar from the leaf? Like I just said, actually, instead of me reading it, why don't one of y'all read it? Will someone come off mute and read what happens to sugar from the leaf? Dead silence. Just dead air.
Sir, I was going to read it, or no, Casey, you can go.
No, Mazari can read it.
Fine. Sugar is needed to power respiration. Roots and shoots need to grow in order for the plant to survive. The sugar produced from photosynthesis helps the plant grow.
Thank you so much, Mazari. Right? So the sugar that the leaves are making needs to go to the whole plant in order for the plant to be able to grow. We talked about the apical meristems, the longitudinal or lateral meristems. So the plant's growing all over the place. It's growing up and down, it's growing wide. So the cells need energy, which means that they have to get the sugar. So the sugar is going to go through the whole plant, and the phloem is what takes it throughout the whole plant. Okay. Any questions about that before we move on? Y'all are so funny. Okay. So let's talk about some situations then. We mentioned a second ago, the stomata doesn't want to be open all the time, right? If the stomata is open too long, the plant's going to lose a bunch of water. So under what kind of a situation would you expect the stomata to be closed? If you want a hint, you can always back. Think of it this way. When do we lose the most water? Imagine that I got up right now and started doing some jumping jacks, right? Aside from being embarrassed because of my body, imagine the amount of sweat that I would produce, right? I would start to get very hot. My body starts to sweat so that it can try and cool itself down. But that's a way of water loss, right? So the same thing happens to a plant. If the plant is in a hot, dry place, if it opens up its pores, it's going to lose a whole lot of water. Whoop. I don't know what just happened. There we go. Sorry. I almost exited the meeting. Hamza will be the next person to read. How about that, Mazari? Okay, so a hot, dry environment is going to be bad. That means that the stomata should be closed. Will result in lots of water loss if the stomata is open. So if it's going to be hot and dry, it's going to stay closed. When would you expect the stomata then to stay open? Probably the opposite, right? So if hot and dry will result in a closed stomata, probably cold, humid, wet would result in an open stomata. So you would see this, I guess, humidity in a place like the jungle, right? The jungle might not necessarily be cold, but there's so much moisture in the air that whenever the pore opens, the concentration of water is probably going to be very similar inside the plant as outside the plant. And if not, really close, then maybe just slightly under. That way the water is not going out of the plant quite as fast, so the plant will not be as dehydrated. Versus, like let's say that you had a plant in the Amazon jungle as opposed to a plant in Desert Valley, right? In a Death Valley. It's going to be crazy hot in Death Valley, right? The plants are probably not going to have the same adaptations. They're probably not going to survive in either location. Like the desert plant wouldn't do well in a jungle, and a jungle plant wouldn't do well in a desert because they're adapted to their environment. And part of that has to do with the amount of stomata that are open or closed at any given time. Thank you. Thank you, Hamza, for being so generous. Okay. Are there any questions about this before we move on? All right. I'm going to give you, let's see, how much time do we have left? I think maybe I should just run through these with you because I want to make sure you guys have enough time to do your exit ticket and to work on your project. Okay, I'll run through these with you because I don't want to run out of time. So why do plants need carbon dioxide? Where does it come from? Why do plants need carbon dioxide?
For photosynthesis. What? Photosynthesis.
You got it. Very good. Photosynthesis. Carbon dioxide is a reactant in the photosynthesis equation. Photosynthesis, carbon dioxide is a product of respiration, which means it's in the air because animals breathe it out, right? Okay, why do animals and plants need oxygen? If plants need carbon dioxide for photosynthesis, why do you think animals and plants need oxygen? For respiration. Oxygen is a reactant in the respiration equation. So both plants and animals need oxygen. In order to create energy. Oh, whoops. I answered the next question. There you go. Easy. What else does a plant produce? Pretty simple, right? The plant is going to be making oxygen that we breathe, but it's also going to be making sugar in the form of glucose. Usually as fruits, sometimes it's stored in the root as starch. And then of course, finally, vascular tissue. So vascular tissue transports water and let's just call it nutrients in the plant. Similar to the circulatory system. The xylem transports water. The phloem transports sugar. Boom. Easy. Okay, I'll give you a second for that. Okay. All right. So I'll go ahead and leave this up, but I'll go forward real quick. The plant project is due on Friday, like I mentioned. The requirements are here on the slide if you don't remember what it is. Again, it'll be due at the end of the day on Friday, so you still got time today, time tomorrow, Thursday, Friday to get it finished. Here's the exit ticket. Make sure that you work on your exit ticket first, and then any time that you have left, you can work on your plant project. Remember that class is not over until 3:20, right? So we still got at least 12 minutes. So make sure that you complete your exit ticket. If you hadn't noticed, there's been a lot of effort placed on getting your exit tickets finished. So if you are not doing it now, you're just going to be hunted down later, so might as well just get it done now. So go ahead and do those. I'm sure that you guys have already gathered, we have all these different trackers and stuff to get it done. So as y'all turn in your exit tickets, I'm going to go ahead and be filling out my tracker. I'll put on some music so you have something to listen to, but once you finish your exit ticket, you are working on your plant project. Mr. Martinez talks like he's about to stop typing, takes a long pause, and then starts talking again the second you think it's over. Thank you, Casey, and thank you for doing your exit ticket. Sometimes I pause because I'm thinking, sometimes I pause because I want you guys to catch up. It just depends on what's happening.
No, like you have these full sentences, and then I think you're gonna move on, and then you start typing again.
Because there's more to say. When my little sister was growing up, like when she was tiny, she was one of those kids that would be like, and then, like she's telling a story, and like 95% of the story is just her saying, and then. Anyway, that's just came into my head for a second. But okay, we got about 10 minutes. So make sure that you finish your exit ticket. Any time you have left, work on your plant project. Sorry we got a late start because I have to look at the schedule again. I thought that the last class ended at 2:15, but this class starts at 2:15. So maybe the last class ends at 2:10. So I gotta double check that. You know what? I do say and then in my head. I try to keep some of those things in my head, like, and then, Okay, so like I promised, I'm gonna go ahead and put on the music. So wait a minute, I heard this song earlier. It's supposed to be on random. Yep.
Happy Tuesday, welcome. This is Mrs. Flack, your resident director of college counseling. I just wanted to come on the announcements to share some incredible news about our senior class, our alphas, the very first graduating class at ICO Walden College Prep. As of today, we have hit 100% FAFSA submission. That means 100% of our seniors have submitted their applications for financial aid, opening up tons of opportunities for them to receive aid to go to the college that's best for them. This is a huge accomplishment. I'm going to give a shout out to all the college counselors, the teachers, the students, and the families who have done so much to work with us in hitting this monumentous goal. So again, shout out to our seniors. If you see them, show them some love. And I'm super excited to call us out. Can't stop.
Won't stop.
Welcome.
Woo. That's cool. There is a break in everybody down except virtual kids. Yep. I heard this song earlier. I want to do
Lucid Spark is the virtual whiteboard you need.
Don't look at the ads. Close your eyes. I don't think it's playing my playlist anymore. I think that's why it's not random.